All right, family, it is conference time.
It's that
You've been
time.
emailing us and asking us, when are you guys opening registration? And registration is now open.
Right now.
Culture Proof Conference 2025 is now currently accepting your registration. And they're coming in. Like, I'm so super excited to see
Yes.
multiple generations of families just registering for the conference. The theme this year is Worthy of It All.
We have some great speakers, as always, that will minister to the entire family. And
Yes.
so I'm really excited about the breakout sessions.
Oh my
That was
goodness.
something that we were able to do this past conference, and it was a hit, man. It was
Yes.
great. It was great, and we have some things planned for this year. And so
Yes.
go to cultureproof.net and you'll be able to see the lineup of speakers. You'll be able to see breakout sessions, different things, details about this year's
That's
conference.
right. The theme revolves around the fact that Jesus is worthy to be exalted, that
Yes.
Jesus is worthy, that he should go public through us in every aspect, every area of our lives. And so, to that end, we are leaving no stone unturned
That's
as
right.
we talk about what is happening in the culture and how we can best reflect that Jesus is worthy of it all. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. We're going to
Mm.
be talking about what's happening in geopolitics. Like, what does this mean for the
Yes.
return of Christ? We're going to be talking about purity. What about fall after fall of
Mm.
pastors in our churches today? What in the world is going on? Or as we
Yes.
like to ask, what
What
in
in
the
the
church
church?
is going on? So we're going to talk about how do we engage? How do we equip our kids to stand? How do
Yes.
we live faithful lives for the glory of God in 21st century America?
Mm.
We've got 10 keynotes, 6 breakouts to choose from, 2 lunch and learns where you've got to register for that early because space is
Yes.
limited,
Yes.
especially if you want to choose your lunch options. You've got to check that out. We don't want to waste your time. We want you to be
Not at
blessed
all.
and we want you to leave equipped.
And as always, a highlight is our children's track. We
That's
have the
right.
culture proof kids and teens, and your children will be ministered to. And so it's just going to be a great time for the family.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's always a great time to gather with the family of God to be equipped and to be encouraged. If you've got any questions, you can get those answered by going to cultureproof.net. That's cultureproof.net. Cultureproof 2025 happens June 19th through the 21st. We're in
Mhm.
the same location. That's Faith Baptist Church in Bartlett, Tennessee. Hopefully, we will see you in just a few short months. The year was 2014, and we had just given birth to baby number 4, and we had 2 kids in school and one who was headed in the same direction, and we realized that the Lord was calling us to lock in, and we made a decision that has really truly been probably up there with the top 3 best decisions that we have ever made, and we're gonna talk about that today. This is Culture Proof.
Every single stronghold, we pull them down. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out Culture Proof. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And today we are talking about what it means to lock in the education of our kids. We made the decision back in 2014 to homeschool our kids, and we have not looked back. It's up there with the decisions that we have made in our life. I don't know, maybe you'd say individually, but certainly as parents, it's up
Mhm.
there with the best decisions that we have made. And so we want to share a little bit about that with you today. I think that in this country, the Lord is calling a lot of people to lock in. And I
Mm.
think people are ignoring that because it's inconvenient.
Yeah, I think it's one thing it's worth praying about as believers. I feel like, man, you can't just ignore what's
Mm,
going on. You can't just say, well, I was all right, so they'll be all right. There's different things happening. It's more intense now, and I
mhm.
think it has to be something that's considered by every family. Should we homeschool our children, and primarily for discipleship purposes,
Yeah,
as well as education, but discipleship purposes, I think it would be prudent for all families to pray about that decision.
absolutely. This podcast is brought to you by our premier sponsor, bjupresshomeschool.com. And incidentally, there is a 1-day spring sale happening today. And so we thought, man, how important would it be for us to coincide our talking about the 1-day spring sale where you can save on your homeschooling curriculum with talking about our homeschooling journey and why it's so important for us to be intentional as parents. So not only do we want to direct you to bjupresshomeschool.com/cultureproof, but we want to tell you that when you check out today only, you're going to use the promo code CP15 and save 15%. Maybe you've been thinking about homeschooling. Maybe you're looking at what's going on in this
Yeah.
country and you're like, man, it's time to get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Now is the time for you to go ahead and lock in, make the decision that you will not regret. You're not going to regret it for your kids, and you're not going to regret it for your own peace of mind. Check out our friends at bjupresshomeschool.com. At checkout, use the promo code CP15
Mhm.
and save 15%. This is the time to order your homeschooling curriculum. Like if you kind of wait for the deals, this is a deal. This is your
Right.
sale. This is your coupon.
Yeah.
Don't miss this opportunity for today only, March 25th. You can save 15% when you use that promo code CP15. Those savings are huge. They add up. And so you don't want to miss out on that. bjupresshomeschool.com/culture-proof. When you follow that link, that'll be your way of letting them know that the Addison sent you. Okay, Will the Great. I was
Yes.
looking at some information and I was just thinking back because I measure things in sort of like the number of children that we had at a certain time, or like
Mhm.
how old a certain kid was,
Yeah.
And I think back to 2014, and we had just had Nathaniel, baby number 4. And we had 2 daughters who were in public school. They were in
Mhm.
public elementary school, and they had been in both. They had been in private school and then public school, at least one. It's a long story. There was not space. There was no room for her at the end. And so we had to split them up. And we're going through all of these things. And, part of the reason for that was just really, I feel like we were just uninformed
Mm.
about what the objectives really are for homeschooling.
Yeah.
And what pushed us over the edge was not so much because we did have some concerns about education. We did have some concerns about their character growth. But the thing that really pushed us over the edge was we wanted to disciple our kids. We
Mhm.
wanted to see Christ formed in them.
Yeah. And that requires time,
Yes.
and so if you're giving the time over to someone else, they are really discipling the children, and so the main feature, there, whoever wins the time wins the battle.
That's it. The
Yeah.
lion's share of the
The
time.
lion's
Yeah.
share of the time, and so yeah, it's a decision that you look at and you like, and from the onset you like kind of look at it and it's like, man, can I do this? Can we do this?
Yeah.
Because man, it's going to require a lot of sacrifice and
Yeah.
things like that. So I know there's a lot of apprehension and even some fear about doing that. And then the questions about will they be adequately educated, and
Mhm.
all those things. But man, I really feel like taking that to the Lord in prayer and asking him to help you and to show you exactly what to do is where we need to be.
Yeah.
And man, you will find that there's so many people now who are homeschooling,
Yeah.
especially after COVID.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. We got to
know,
talk about that.
yeah, they saw what was going on. It was like, man, I can do this.
Yeah.
I don't like what they're learning in school, and a lot of times that was for purely academic reasons.
Right.
But as believers, I think we need to look at discipleship, look at what the word says about it. We all know Deuteronomy 6 and other passages. It just shows that we are the ones that are supposed to be discipling our children
Yep.
and have the lion's share of the time.
We have the most eternal purpose for homeschooling. We
Mhm.
have the best reason for homeschooling that you will find on the planet, and that is to see Christ formed in our kids.
Right.
And I will say, when we made the decision to homeschool, it was not something that was lightly considered.
No.
And so that's why I feel a lot of compassion and I feel a lot of understanding for parents who are trying to make that decision.
Mhm.
You and I did not come from a long line of homeschoolers.
No.
In fact, we actually came from, I would say, the side of the tracks where it was like, you do what?
Right.
Like, what do you do?
And not
Like,
really an
it just was
understanding of what
strange
that
to
is.
us.
Like what is it?
Yeah.
And will it work? type
Yeah.
thing. You know,
Yeah.
are you ready to do that? Like, and what is that really?
Mhm.
You know?
And I can remember early on, just because I felt so out of my element,
Mhm.
and there were so many factors that needed to be considered for us to homeschool, both in the work that we were doing, and I think a lot of times what people don't like to talk about is that when you are thinking about homeschooling in this two parent, income driven culture, you are thinking about, wait a minute, what am I going to do about childcare?
Mm.
Usually, home education is not a question of, do I want to do it? It's
Mhm.
it's usually not a question of, do I feel capable? I'm saying that all of those things can be components,
Mhm.
but I think what a lot of families are considering is, okay, wait, there's going to be a loss of income if one person is home schooling,
Mm.
right? Like if one person is home schooling, then who's going to be out working, and what does that mean for the family's budget? I think
Mm.
then it becomes like a childcare issue. So it's like,
Mm.
well, if we're both still working, do we hire a teacher? Like all of these things are questions that I think have to be explored with sincerity and with honesty.
Mhm.
And again, I think the deciding factor has to always be what is of utmost importance.
Mhm.
Listen, there are some people who would say, well, I've got to maintain a certain quality of life. What does your quality of life matter here if in eternity your kids are not with you? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if your kids are wrestled away from the faith because of neglect or because of indifference, then what does having a good quality of life here mean
Mhm.
in light of eternity? You know what I mean? And when you think about that, it helps you to prioritize where you are as a family,
Yeah.
what your goals and objectives are. And it may mean, I'm not saying that it always means this, but it may mean that in the big scheme of things, there are sacrifices that you make,
Mhm.
that there are things that you give up. But the question is, what do you gain by bringing your kids home? I saw a post the other day, and my goodness, it just really struck me in thinking about how we have normalized things that we would have never read about in scripture, or we would have never understood historically, that kids would be separated from their parents for like 8 to 9 hours a day, that kids would have more respect for their teachers than they have for their parents, that they would see that place as more authoritative than the home. All of these things are not natural. They're
Mm.
not normal, and they actually disrupt God's order for the family, his design for the family. I remember with our two oldest daughters, doing homework with them, which that was another factor,
Mhm.
because they would come home from school and then I would spend 3 hours reteaching them the way I wanted them to learn the information.
Right.
No exaggerate. I mean, I would sit there at the table like, no, we're not doing that. And I remember the first few times, because your kids are really, they get programmed really, really quickly, And I remember maybe our older daughter saying, well, Miss So and so said I need to. And you're like, hold up. I don't want you to do that. And I can tell you specific. I remember this conversation with reading comprehension.
Mhm.
And one of the assignments was that she was supposed to read a passage, and I'm supposed to hold a timer
Mhm.
while she reads. And I'm supposed to mark every time she misses a word, every time she hesitates. And I think she had like 2 minutes to read the passage. And I remember I did the exercise the first time and I followed the instructions. And then I asked her, I was like, so tell me about the passage. And she didn't comprehend what she had just read. She was so focused on reading it in 2 minutes and not making any mistakes and just like getting. And I was like, wait a minute, but we read to comprehend.
Mm.
Like we read to understand. And yes, we want to read well, but the aim of reading is to understand what you are reading. And so I was like, we're not doing that, But kids get really conditioned early
Yeah.
on that the authority is at school.
Right.
That if Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so says do this, then who are you? You're just the parent. You can't
Right.
say do otherwise.
Right. And pretty much they are, as far as that's concerned,
Yeah,
because
that's
we've
true.
given that over. And I just want to say, and we've said this before, that we do not believe that homeschooling is salvific, but I
No.
would tell you that discipleship is.
Amen.
And so, this is
Because
a
discipleship
yeah,
is for the believer. It's
yeah.
for the follower of
So
Christ.
this is
Yes.
another opportunity in which we
Mm.
can disciple our children, and have that time to build them up in that. And so, because I would just say early on, and just being transparent, we would see certain things in homeschooling families that were kind of like, oh no,
It was
like
off-putting.
we didn't want that. And it was a feel of like, if you don't homeschool, your child is going to hell and
Yeah.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
but I will say, there is a component of, if you're doing it with the right heart and that you want to disciple your children, man, it will lead to opportunities for them to hear the gospel and
Amen.
to receive Christ, and all that stuff will happen in the course
Mhm.
of that, and so we have to really, as Christians, once again, my thing is always for the body of Christ and the believer. We need to take this seriously as we see what's going on. A lot of times we like to lament and say, oh man, look at this, look at that, look at
Mhm.
that. But we have something that we can do.
Yes.
And homeschooling is one of those things that you can do. And so now, man, we talk about BJU Press Homeschool with this, 15,
CP 15,
Yeah,
save
see-
15%.
15%. This is a perfect time
Yeah.
to be able to look into this and say, okay, man, let's see about this. Let's see what this is. Let's see if we can do this.
That's right.
And so, just want to encourage families with a mindset of discipling your children to go into it with that mindset.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see the rewards in that, in being able to have that time with your children.
I feel like there's just too much that's at stake. And I know we got to grab a break here. And so I'll kind of continue with this thought on the other side of the break. But to the point that you're making about homeschooling being salvific and not being confused that just because I homeschool, my kids are going to be saved. But I'm not confused about that, right? And I don't think that those two things are synonymous. I will say this, though, that influence is real.
Yeah,
Influence
it
is
is.
really real. And so real and so big, if you will, is influence that God instructs us. You look at Deuteronomy 6, right? God instructs us that we are to be with our children. And you see the expectation there that's so great and so strong is going to be the influence of the parents over the children just by living faithfully, that it's going to provoke a question, that it's going to provoke that curiosity in the kid that's going to say, what's the meaning of keeping these statutes? And why are you doing all of these things? And then God gives the instruction that when you are asked that question, you are to say that you were slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought you out. So in other words, you're about to now testify of who God is and why he is worthy, that you would submit your life to him in obedience, that you would be doing all of the things that he's told you to do. I would argue that we don't often get to that conversation because we don't have that kind of time with our kids. Our kids are not observing us living faithfully, so they don't have that kind of curiosity about our way of life. This is why I believe, and this may be a provocative statement, but this is why I believe that for so many kids, it's true. The first time they hear the gospel is in youth group, because they're not getting an opportunity to see this lived out in their parents, where they ask a question. The parent almost thinks it's not his or her job to even share the gospel, that it's got to be somebody that's like a, qualified minister who's sharing the gospel. And I think all of these ways present like an attack on God's order and God's expectation of the family. I want to kind of stay there just a little bit, but first I want to take a break, and I want to say a huge thank you to our friends over at We Heart Nutrition. Look, I've been telling all of my friends about my use of the We Heart Nutrition supplements, and I got to tell you, I don't know if that's a marker for kind of like, certain stages of life, the things that you talk about with your friends, but there are changes that happen in our body. And when our body is not in balance, when our body's out of whack, we feel it. And maybe we don't even know, we can't put our finger on exactly what we are feeling, but we are deficient in so many areas. And We Heart Nutrition provides the best supplements to get you right. That is the bottom line. They provide the highest quality supplements to get your body back in alignment and as it should function, or as it should be functioning. But we appreciate We Heart Nutrition. Like, I got to tell you, I've noticed changes in my body. I've noticed changes in my emotions and my hormones, and that was something that I didn't expect to see. It makes sense why you start to feel better. In fact, I got a text message just today from a friend who got her first order of We Heart Nutrition supplements in. She was super excited. I'm like, you're not going to be disappointed. Not at all. You can try out our friends over at We Heart Nutrition. Use the promo code Culture Proof when you go to weheartnutrition.com. You'll save 20% by doing that. So go to weheartnutrition.com. Use the promo code CultureProof and save 20%. And by the way, can I just mention that 10% of everything that goes into this company comes right back out to help in the fight to protect and defend life.
Mhm.
Oh, great. You're doing the best for
Yeah.
your body and for the body of Christ. So check them out today. That's WeHeartNutrition.com. Use the promo code CultureProof and save 20%. The proof is in the discipline, and you are not going to be disappointed that you are taking these supplements. I guarantee it. In fact, they guarantee it. You've got 60 days to try out these supplements. And if you don't like them, you can get a full refund. How about that? 60 days to try out their supplements. That's the Happy Heart guarantee. You can't beat it with a bat. All right, getting back to what we're talking about today, we're talking about the fact that parents need to lock in. I was thinking about this, and I kind of wanted to draw a parallel, Will the Great, and kind of get your take on this, right?
Mhm.
So I'm looking at President Trump just last week, the end of last week, signing this executive order to
Mhm.
begin shuttering the Department of Education, and even explaining, we've got some clips that we want to play for you, but even explaining what this means and how this has been a long time coming. And I thought it's so interesting, the time frame that we're looking at, because we are almost exactly 5 years. Like, this time of the year is almost exactly 5 years to the day, I guess, loosely speaking, maybe to the month, okay, that we saw schools shut down in America during COVID. And it's exactly around this time that parents started kind of waking up to this idea
Hmm.
that, you know what, I can educate my
Yeah.
kids. And we actually have data to show that once the pandemic started to wane, parents were not eager to like flood their kids back into the public education system. Parents were kind of like, hey, you know, I got to sit in on some of those Zoom calls and some of those teacher things. And you know what? I can do this. Okay. Like, I think I can do this, and I can leave out all the stuff that I don't want my
Mhm.
kids getting. And so I just found it really interesting. I found this article over at, let's see, Education Week. And I thought this was really interesting. It was looking at sort of like a timeline for how the schools were shutting down during COVID. And I thought, man, this is so interesting to me. So January 19th, 2020, if you can kind of go back, think about like toilet paper scarcity, and people were so uncertain, like you didn't know
Yeah.
what was going
It's
on.
crazy.
Everybody was like, oh my goodness, we were super anxious. We didn't know what was going on. Well, not everybody, but there was a lot of concern. I'll just say it that way. So January 19th, 2020, you had the first recorded COVID-19 illness in the United States. Then February 25th in 2020, the CDC warned schools to prepare for teleschool disruptions. Okay, so prepare for teleschool disruptions, like prepare, get ready, because this thing is spreading, and we're probably about to like upset our way of life. February 27th, coronavirus scare prompts the school to shut down. And this will be the first of like every school in the country just basically shutting down. By March 11th, the World Health Organization declares coronavirus a global pandemic. And I think that's when people collectively lost their minds. This is not the scope of this podcast, but that's where the toilet paper hoarding began. That's where the leaving the groceries out on the porch for like 3 days began. I
Man,
mean,
it
just
was
if you can
crazy.
remember that, right?
Yes.
But in the midst of all of that, there was something else that began. Parents began educating their kids at home.
Mm.
And I think for so many moms and dads, the realization was made that, I really like my kids.
Yeah.
And I actually like being around them. I want them here. And I think I'm just going to continue doing this.
It's amazing how it takes things like that to open up eyes. I just remember, a few years back as well, when there was this, bathroom mandate that was going on.
Yes.
I believe it was in Texas. There was churches. There was a church that said, "Hey, we can educate them here. Bring your kids here."
Yep.
It's like it takes those type of things happening for us to act.
Yes.
And it's like, man, I wish it didn't. I wish
No.
it was just kind of like, man, we are proactive. We see what's going on, and we just do what we need to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it takes some external like things to happen, like COVID, like bathroom mandates and
Yeah.
stuff like that, for the people of God to say, all right, we don't have to
That's
take
so
this.
interesting what
you
you're
know?
saying. Yeah, that is so true, because if you think about it, we often just want to live a very comfortable life.
Mhm.
Like, if things are just going along as they've been going along, we usually are not moved to change that
Right.
unless there's something that's like a major jolt.
Yeah.
Something that you go, whoa, what has happened here?
Mhm.
Usually we just want to continue on in our levels of comfort, which, as you're saying that, it makes me think of like, man, that the Lord allows for there to be situations in our life that kind of like stir us
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
that sort of like
It's true.
complacency. Like the Lord He's gracious to
Yeah.
allow us to have these things that jolt us, maybe deepen our prayer life, cause us to press in or lock in on
Mm.
the reality of who He is. And if those things would not be touched or would not be shaken, we might just continue on in sort of like this apathetic existence. Hey, I'm saved, I'm content, but like, I don't bother God, He doesn't bother me. But the Lord allows those things so that we can be refined, right?
Mhm.
Like so that we can draw closer to Him, so that we could press in, wanting to know Him more. And you see that almost paralleled in like the natural things that happen.
Mm.
They shake us and they show us something about ourselves that we didn't know. And to your point, all of these parents didn't know that they could educate their kids at home.
Mhm.
And then they realized that they could and decided not to go back. Look at this story. This is from The Hill. This was out in 2024, near the end of 2024. New data from Johns Hopkins Institute for Education Policy's Homeschool Research Lab found that 90% of states that report homeschooling enrollment found increases for the 2023-24 academic year, despite assumptions many made that home instruction would fizzle out after the pandemic.
Wow.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Parents realized something about their desire and their ability to not only educate their kids, but be under the same roof with their kids. Like they're like, hey, this is not so bad. Like God is wise. Like, yes, I should influence my kid. Getting back to this article here, out of the 21 states that have reported homeschooling data from the last academic year, only 2 saw a decrease in numbers. Only 2 states saw a decrease in numbers. That's New Hampshire and Vermont. Not surprised. 9 states are still working on their enrollment numbers, and 21 states do not release that data publicly. Quote, I think everybody knows that homeschooling went up during the pandemic, but people really thought that when schooling went back to normal, as the pandemic kind of waned, that everybody would go back to their normal way of educating. And so every year we keep thinking that the numbers are going to drop, and the numbers are going to drop. And we keep not seeing that happening to the degree that we thought it would in education circles. This is Angela Watson, the director of the research lab there at Johns Hopkins Institute for Education. Back to this article, but tracking homeschoolers is a bit tricky due to how different states count who is getting home instruction. In some states, homeschoolers are put under the private school umbrella, while in others, they can be counted as private school students, but aren't necessarily. Okay, there was another piece to this article here that really grabbed my attention. Oh, here we go. While there is a clear growth trend in homeschooling, the reason for that growth is unknown. And that's really interesting to me, right? That they have not been able to put their finger on exactly why homeschooling remains an upward trend. Of course, I have some thoughts and I have some ideas about this. What is clear is that this time the growth is not driven by a global pandemic or sudden disruptions to traditional schooling. Something else is driving this growth, the report said. Also, it is important to note that these are counts of homeschooled students, not percentages. These are counts of homeschool students, not percentages. So the increase is even more interesting because the overall number of U.S. students is declining due in part to declining birth rates. In other words, ultimately, we see that the number of homeschooled students is going up as the total number of U.S. students is going down.
Wow.
That's interesting. I think that tells us something about the homeschoolers. I really do. I think it's number one, that the families are reproducing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's number one. But number two, I think there is a motivation that our country, thinking that everybody's liberal left leaning, doesn't recognize or doesn't account for. And it's that parents do want to have an upfront role in the lives of their children. And maybe they do see themselves as more qualified than they've been led to believe they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing is, when you get a taste of, just the fact that the experts aren't the people that need to be in charge all
Right.
the time. I think that helps you to overcome some of the things you may feel as a parent of why you can't do it. And because I think people have seen like, man, no, I don't have to have this degree or
Right.
do this. And a matter of fact, I know my child better than they do,
Yes.
even with their degrees.
That's right.
And I have been equipped to do this, and I know many people are homeschooling for different reasons. This is not all for discipleship reasons, but for the
That's right.
believer, that should be first and foremost. And so I think even with that boom, a lot of people are seeing that I can educate my child at home, and I think that's a good thing. I
Yeah.
think, a lot of times we put all the eggs in the basket of the experts.
Mhm.
These are the people, and only these people can do it. And that's what they want.
Yeah.
They want you to feel like you can't do it. But this has shown people that, hey, I can do this,
Yeah.
and I will do
Yeah.
this, So I think it's a good thing, and I'm glad that the numbers aren't going backwards, or going back, but they're steadily rising, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I have no regrets about what we have done in the education of our kids. Did I have moments of overwhelm? Do I have moments of overwhelm? Of course, like the reality sets in that you think, okay, I am responsible, right? Like I've got to be a responsible parent. But then you quickly remember that like, but hold on a second though. What I'm not trying to do is replicate public school at home.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a mandate that I've got to replicate public school at home. And which, by the way, even as I say that, I want to encourage our listeners to please keep praying for our brothers and sisters in Illinois, because, I think that is exactly what the move is in Illinois. It is to mandate that parents simply replicate public school at home. The government is like, you can feed them,
Mhm.
you can clothe them, you can house them. We don't want to foot the bill for that.
Mm.
Okay. But you must make slaves for us.
Mm.
You must make intellectual slaves for us. And you must not muddy the waters. You must not muddy their thinking with your fundamentalist Jesus is Lord teaching.
Right.
And I think that's what we see happening. And I got to tell you, we're keeping a close eye on what happens in Illinois. And we're
Mhm.
also keeping an eye on who's pushing for legislation like this all across this country. Be
Yeah.
watching for some information coming from us exposing one of the main groups behind this type of legislation that's looking to curtail the rights of parents over their children. We are watching this, and this doesn't lead anywhere good.
Mm.
It does not have the mind of God toward children with regard to parents. And
Mm.
so if it's not God's mind, then
Right.
there's only one other alternative.
Exactly.
All right. I want to take a break and mention another one of our sponsors.
Yes, accountable to you using a smartphone or computer opens the door to a host of digital temptations. In a world saturated with pornography and other harmful content, what's a Christian to do? We need to take a proactive approach, welcoming transparency in our digital media choices, and accountable to you makes that easy. The accountability software provides detailed activity reports for all your family's devices in real time. With accountability in place, your family can guard against temptations online and live with purity and integrity. Learn more and try for free at accountable2than you.com/cultureproof.
As we go back to talking about it's time for parents to lock in, I want to sort of remind our listeners, when we were talking about what was going on in Illinois, we mentioned this organization called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, CRHE. And they have this campaign. Really, it's a war on parental rights. They are pushing this narrative that kids who are educated at home are abused, that they have no recourse, that they have no personal agency, that parents do not have the right to make every decisions, or every decision regarding their child, all of the
Mm.
decisions. They believe that the child must share in the decision making. The child must have a certain amount of autonomy. And, this is incredibly disturbing because the picture that gets painted by this organization and also the liberal left who wants to own our children,
Mhm.
the picture that gets painted is that, homeschool kids are in these home prisons,
Mm.
that they are being abused. And in a previous podcast, I mentioned, just looking at what's going on in the public school system, like manage what's going on there before you start setting your sights on people's homes. And as I'm saying that, a few days later, there's an article right out of Illinois, of a teacher who sexually assaulted a student. Like just days after we released that podcast, where I'm like, tell me about the abuse that's happening in the public school system. Here is the article here. Newly revealed texts show skin crawling messages that a married Illinois teacher allegedly sent to her 15-year-old student that she is accused of raping.
Wow.
Okay, here it is. Skin crawling text messages allegedly sent by a married Illinois high school teacher to a 15-year-old student show her professing her love and pining over having sex with him. And police say it's proof that she sexually assaulted the boy. Christina Formella, a 30-year-old special ed teacher and soccer coach at Downers Grove South High School, allegedly told the victim, you know what? I'm not going to quote her here. The text messages are so inappropriate. They're included in this article. I will put a link in the show notes to the article. If you'd like, you can go read it yourself. Here is my point. She was involved in a relationship with this boy, and it was only discovered by his parents because they updated his phone. And updating his phone, they were downloading all of his apps and everything from the cloud and found these messages. And the mother immediately went to the police. The teacher then said that the boy somehow got her phone, entered her pen, and sent these messages to himself.
Wow.
And then deleted the messages from her phone, but they remained on his phone. That's a lot of gymnastics, right? That's a lot of jumping to do when you are a married woman and there is a text exchange between you and a 15-year-old boy. Now, again, why am I saying this? Because this is out of an Illinois school. This is a public high school where you've got a teacher who is tasked with helping and serving the students, engaging in unspeakable acts with a teenage boy on school grounds.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting to me about that is that, like, people would say, well, Mika, you're being hyperbolic when you're yelling out and talking about all of the sexual abuse. Like, no, but just read the articles. Like, just read the stories, because the idea is supposed to be that we are the abusive ones, that we are allowing our kids to be educated at home, that we are sealing them off from the world. And this in and of itself is abusive, but we ignore the actual abuse.
Yeah.
Like, we ignore the actual abuse. So let's take a listen. Last week, as President Trump talked about why, dismantling the Department of Education is a long time coming, that there are people who have known that this needed to be done, that the Department of Education, as bloated as it is not serving anyone. And we have known that. We're in pretty bad shape, but just no one had the courage to do anything about it. Here's President Trump last week at the signing of this executive order to begin downsizing the Department of Education. He is going to go into detail in talking about what remains, because there's some question about that. And I think it's good to speak with clarity on what this is and what this isn't. We'll kind of work our way through some of these clips. Listen.
President Carter created the Federal Education Department in 1979. It was opposed by members of his own cabinet, as well as the American Federation of Teachers, the New York Times editorial board, and the famed Democrat Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. History has proven them right, absolutely right. After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. It's an amazing stat. Those are two stats you don't want: the most money spent per pupil, and you're at the bottom of the list. And that's where we are, like it or not. And we've been there for a long time. 70% of 8th graders are not proficient in either reading or in math. 70%. 40% of 4th graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read. Students in our public elementary and middle schools score worse in reading today than when the department opened by a lot. In Baltimore, 40% of the high schools have 0 students who can do basic mathematics. Not even the very simplest of mathematics. I said, give me your definition of basic, and they're talking about like adding a few numbers together. Despite these breathtaking failures, the department's discretionary budget has exploded by 600% in a very short period of time, and it employs bureaucrats in buildings all over Washington, D.C. And as a former real estate person, I will tell you, I ride through the streets of Washington and it says Department of Education, Department of Education. I said, how do you fill those buildings? It's crazy what's happened over the years.
You know, I think it's so interesting to hear President Trump say, well, what do you mean when you say they're not proficient? Because I think we hear a conversation like this and we think, okay, is it like maybe algebra? And you say, okay, maybe some kids just are not good with algebra, but maybe they're good with geometry. Maybe they know how to do other things. And to hear the president say, no, they're saying just addition. Like they can't add a few numbers. I mean, that's worse than we imagine. Yeah. That's worse than we think. And I got to say, you know, to understand that you as a parent loving your kid, that you're going to do your best. You know how your kid is wired. You know, like as a teacher, yeah, you may be able to see when a student is getting frustrated. You may be able to know when you can pull back or when you need to pull back. But man, as a parent, you have a different sense about the way your kid is wired. You can tell when it's like, you know what? Maybe you need to sleep on this concept. Yeah. And we come back to it. And you have the freedom to be able to do that. I think it's just time for parents to lock in. Yeah. It's time for parents to say, wait a minute. All of these things are happening around me. And, you know, I don't know if it can be clearer that now is the time for me to do the thing that I felt like I should have done. But I didn't know how to do it or if it would be acceptable. And look, I'm not saying that you need to have permission. You don't need to have permission. But if you care about that, now is the time that everybody is talking about the utter failure that the Department of Education has been, the utter failure that the public school system has been, and it's not going away. People have been talking about this for a long time. The prestige and the so-called honor that was once attached to your kid graduating even from the best public school in this country does not compare to your kid actually being educated. And this is the time to lock in. This is the time to lock in. And so I would say if you are thinking about this and this is the time that you're like, okay, considering what you're going to do next year as we're getting ready to, you know, start moving toward that summer break, take advantage of this one-day spring sale and check out bjupresshomeschool.com. I will tell you, well, let me just finish saying you'll save 15% when you use the Culture Proof code CP15. Do not miss this one-day deal. Don't miss it. CP15 and save 15% when you go to bjupresshomeschool.com/cultureproof. Don't forget the hyphen. Just use CP15 when you check out and save 15%. If you are already a BJU Press homeschooler, and you got to reorder, go ahead and do that today. Like just be wise with your funds and go ahead and do that today and use the promo code CP15. If you're like me, you like deals. So this is the time to get your deals, right? CP15. Look, we got to lock in. It's not just for education's sake. Like, I feel like that's almost sort of like the low hanging fruit. But I feel like the thing that should be most important to us is that we want to disciple our kids, that we want to see Christ formed in them, and understanding that whoever has the lion's share of the time has the influence over the kid, understanding that that's the direction that the kid is going to swing in. And I think parents have given that over for so long that we just feel like it's natural. You know, man, I just cannot ever forget Israel Wayne talking about being in front of a group of parents and asking if they wanted to be the number one influence in their kids' lives. And like only 2 people like raised their hands. Yeah. Like, who wants to be the number one influence in your kids' lives? Like, I don't know what kind of, like, what in low self-esteem? You know what I mean? Like, what in not even reading the scriptures? Like, of course we want to influence our kids. We want to be the aroma of Christ to our kids first. Yeah. Like, we're in the house with them. So how much more so should they first see that aroma of Christ, that it would be an aroma that would draw them to the Lord rather than repel them. But so often we're like, go outside the house.
Mm,
Somebody else will take care of our kids.
Mm.
Let us go outside the house for significance,
mhm.
for value, for worth. It's time for parents to lock in.
Yeah, when you look at it, and I think about this from time to time as well, you only have a certain amount of time
That's
with
right.
your children. They grow fast. Why not invest in them as far as godliness,
Yeah.
and discipleship is concerned. And this is a great opportunity to do that. And again, I always say, and I said it before, that for the believer, that should be our chief thing as far as our children. How can we help to instruct them in the ways of the Lord that they can know Him? And this is a great opportunity to do so. So pray, ask the Lord to help you and to show you exactly what you need to do. And then when He show you, do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, we just got to obey what He's saying. And the thing is, again, like I look at JD's 15.
Yeah.
In 3 years, pretty much the society will call him a man.
Society.
I'm
kidding. Oh, no. I didn't know that's where you were going. I thought it was like, he should be moving out. He should be moving on and all of that stuff.
And
I see him as a young man now.
yeah,
Like,
but I mean, like officially, they was
Yeah.
so that's only 3 years from now. And yes, you see him as a young man now, but I'm just saying
Yeah, no,
how
you're right.
how fast, Mariah's 18.
Yeah. And that came out
Gabby's
of nowhere.
So it's quick, and so this is a time that to invest in them and to ask the Lord to help you to do it. Don't try to do it without the help of the Lord.
Yeah.
Don't just try to just do things. Seek Him out. Seek and that's what we did, and He showed us what to do.
Yeah.
And I know He would do the same for you.
Yeah. And he's directed us along the way too.
Yep.
Whenever we felt like, there was something that was missing, if we felt like, at the time, because we've actually used several different homeschooling curricula over the years. And, just the Lord led us because we were new to it. So we didn't have this long history of research and all of this. But when there was something that we felt like, I don't know if this person is getting what this person needs, the Lord would lead us directly where we needed to be. And in this stage in our life, in this stage with the look of our family, man, the Lord led us to BJU Press Homeschool. And I'm going to tell you, it's the organization for me. Like, it's being able to have everything in one place, to know who's doing what, to be able to keep track of grades. I needed that as a homeschooling mom of 6. Now, I've talked to some people who are like, oh, I don't like video teachers. I've talked to some people who are like, no, I'm going to teach my kid every subject. And I'm like, God bless you. Go do that. But I'm going to tell you, I need some help in that, because we've got 6 kids and they've got multiple subjects. And look, anybody that I talk to who doesn't feel like they need to sew their own clothes. I'm sorry, no offense. Like, right. My mom made our clothes too. But do you understand what I'm saying? They're grateful to have allies that they can trust. They are grateful to have people who will come alongside them and help them do the things that they want to do without robbing their kids of their innocence, right? And so I am encouraging you strongly to check out our friends over at bjupresshomeschool.com. It's the curriculum that we trust.
Yeah.
We love our video teachers, and we sit with our kids, not our older kids. Our older kids are independent learners now. So they've got their video instructors. And it's interesting to me because they have come to know the personalities of their teachers and what their teachers require of them. And they've got to meet those goals. And I get to see if they did it via the Homeschool Hub. It's wonderful. Like, if you've been thinking about this, but you thought, I wouldn't know where to start, I don't know what my kid needs, you have access to testing. You can find out exactly where your kid needs to be. And then also, have I even mentioned the homeschool consultants? God bless these women all across this country who are connected to you well into your homeschooling journey and will help you make it through those tough points, those points where you're like, I just don't know if I can do this. Like, that's probably not even in their job description. But they will be there for you because they are also homeschooling moms. Certainly, they're going to help you pick the right curriculum for your kids, knowing what level to start at and what you need to have in your courses. They're there for you. You can check them out. You're not going to be disappointed. You guys know, in listening to this podcast, that we only endorse what we believe in. 100%. And that can make some uncomfortable conversations at different points, but we will only endorse what we believe in. If it's good, we'll say it's good. If it's not, we may not say anything. Because, if you can't say anything good, then you just don't say anything at all. But we want to say a lot of good about our friends over at BJU Press. So check them out. And today's a big deal. We want you to be able to save 15%. It's a one-day sale. It's a big deal for BJU Press Homeschool. And so we want to make sure that you don't miss those savings. I hate to learn about a coupon after it's expired. Only today, March 25th. So today is the day. Go check it out. Go just peruse the website, get familiar with the curriculum, learn what's important over at BJU Press Homeschool. The first thing you're going to notice is that biblical worldview is foundational. That is a non-negotiable. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we love our friends over at BJU Press Homeschool. So you can check them out, bjupresshomeschool.com/culture-proof. And use a promo code this time at checkout, CP15, so that you can save 15% off your order. Don't miss the savings today only. This podcast was an encouragement to lock in and a strong encouragement to consider our friends, consider who we trust as we educate our kids. I want to say this one last thing as we wrap up. And I know we had some more clips that we wanted to get to, but the ultimate point was it's time. Like it's time. You've been thinking about it. Like, should you educate your kids at home? And maybe you believed the lie that you couldn't do it, but there are so many things happening around us that I think for those who have been on the fence, the Lord is making it clear that you can do it, that you're equipped to do it. Right. But I just want to say this, we have 2 kids who are dyslexic and so have some learning disabilities. And it's been difficult, like in the journey. I'm thinking of our older one who's kind of come on the other side of, having the bulk of those disabilities, like teaching her to read was really difficult, was really tough. And she is doing some incredible things right now. I'm not going to mention because she's not giving me permission to mention it. So I'm not going to talk about that. But I never would have imagined that she would be doing that when we started educating her at home. In fact, in school, we were told that she needed to be in special ed. And the experience that I had with special ed was like, no, that's where they want to send kids when they've given up on them. And I'm sorry if that's offensive to people, but that was my experience. Coming out of a public school, the kids who were in special ed were there just to be held for several hours a day. And when that was even suggested, I didn't even know at the time that she was dyslexic, right? But I knew that whatever her issues were, we had to be able to help her. And then we bring her home and we start teaching her at home. And I'll never forget one of the things she said that, I didn't know I was smart. So she's in school and she's thinking that she's just not smart, right? And then we've got another kid, our son, who is 8, who has the same tendencies, shows the same sort of, I guess, dyslexic tendencies that Gabby showed. And my goodness, he has excelled. Like he has taken off. He would dread school, and not just the normal kid. Like, I just want to be outside playing. He just told me, I just can't do it. Like, I can't do it. And then we started using BJU. And I don't know, you saw it, like something just took off for him. And I don't know if it's like the multi-sensory engagement that there's more happening. And so he's not just reading a textbook, which was torture for him, but that he's got some animation and some graphics that are helping him remember how to spell words and how to write sentences. And he's writing his own stories now. Like he is writing his own stories. And so when I tell you that we really do believe in BJU and we believe in the curriculum that has helped our family, we do. And I recommend it 100% without hesitation. There are people who say, well, there are all sorts of really good, curricula out there. All you need to do is pick one. Well, you go right ahead with that philosophy. I will say all day, twice on Sundays, BJU Press Homeschool. And today is a great day for you to be able to save. If you've wanted to check them out, but you're like, I don't know, check them out today. And when you check out, use CP15 so that you can save 15%. It's time to lock in. It's time to make disciples. It's time to remove the competition. in the discipleship of your kids.
Mm.
Remove the competition.
Yeah.
Like, get that competition out of the way and lock in for the glory of God. And so anyway, this is kind of a little bit of a different podcast, but we wanted to just kind of like settle down for a minute and look at what's happening around us. Look at what happened 5 years ago. This time, parents were educating their kids at home and you were like, I can do it. And now the research shows that you're continuing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that I think there are more of us who should be doing it,
Yeah.
right? Like this is, and man, this is going to sound melodramatic, but this is really the hope for the nation, that people are saved. Like, if you want a country that's going to be transformed, the people have to be transformed.
Mm.
Now, you haven't seen that transformation by continuing to farm your kids out to public school.
Right.
So like, stop doing that. You know what I mean? Like, let's actually go ahead and try something different.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not putting them on that pipeline. So before we wrap up, though, I do want to say thank you to Forever Written. They make it possible for us to talk about the power of God's word. Maybe you have a scripture that is important to you, or that the Lord gave you at a time that was really critical in your life. Maybe you've got a verse that you're holding on to, a kid that has not yet come to know the Lord, maybe an adult child, and there's a verse that you might want to get framed to send to that child, maybe to have it displayed in his or her home. Check out our friends over at Forever Written. That's forever-written.com. Ken and Camilla craft beautiful scripture-inspired art that will uplift, that will inspire, that will encourage, that will transform. So you can check them out today. Go to forever-written.com. That's forever-written.com. Timeless truth, beautifully displayed. Check out our friends over at Forever Written. Don't forget the hyphen, forever-written.com. All right, Will the Great, as we come to the end of the podcast, do you have any closing thoughts on what it is to lock in as a parent?
Yeah, definitely. Just what we had been saying, that this is a great opportunity, for more discipleship in the home. Yes, education as far as academics, but also having the time factor in our favor. And so I think it's something that parents, we have to look at pretty strongly,
Mm.
and just kind of weigh things out. Like you're saying, the results that we've been getting by having our children in public school has not benefited us.
No.
And so when you see that, you have to know that there's something else that you can do. And I think homeschooling is one of those things. And this is a great opportunity right now to do so. You see what's happening in culture. You see people who are taking that leap and doing it, and so as believers, we should really consider this. So I just want to just drill down on that as far as discipleship and really playing the long game, not just, it's a sacrifice in the short run. It's a sacrifice of things that may have to adjust in your life and all that. But at the same time, the benefits, the long-term benefits are, something that you really, really want.
Yeah. Man, I was just thinking, when you read church history and you look at the attacks, like the persistent attacks on the gospel and the proliferation of the gospel, when you think about where some of the criticisms came in, and I'm thinking specifically about higher criticism, there was an intellectual attack on the hearts and the minds of believers, not only in this country, but in the world. But it wasn't like America was not immune to the intellectual attacks. And when I think about, our seminaries and our universities, and then also our public education system, my goodness, what is the sort of like the beginning premise when you think about sending kids to a godless institution? The beginning premise is that if God exists, he has no relevance here. And so you invite all kinds of other doubts to enter into the minds of your children. That's the competition that I'm talking about. Like this competition of ideas. And it reminds me of something that James Garlow wrote in his book in the year 2000. He wrote, looking back at 2000 years of the church and kind of like looking at church history and like, what has the Lord done to preserve civilization through the proliferation of the gospel? And this is what he wrote. He wrote, as the 1800s wound to a close, Christianity found itself under intellectual attack from three directions: from science by the theory of evolution, from philosophy in the form of alternative worldviews intended to make belief in God obsolete, and from history in the guise of biblical criticism. If the truth of the Bible could be shown to be doubtful, then there would be nothing left on which Christian faith could stand.
Mm.
If the truth of the Bible could be shown to be at least doubtful, just at least doubtful, then the foundation of the faith, the foundation of Christianity would begin to crumble, right? Like, think about that, and think about like where our kids are now, and think about the competing messages. Like I think about the attack on the truth of God's word in daily messages that our kids are filtering.
Mm.
There's too much at stake not to lock in.
Yeah.
We owe it to our kids to lock in. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth, we remain culture proof. Until next time, Lord willing.
God bless.